And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We're here with Jose, creator of Golz TV, to talk all things FC Dallas 2024 season. Jose, how you doing? Good to talk to you again.
Man, Andrew, I am good, my man. Thank you both, you and Connor, for having me on the show. Man, I get to talk all kinds of footy through other content segments or even my own on Golz TV, and very rarely do I get time dedicated solely to FC Dallas. So, man, I'm pumped. Thanks again for having me.
Good, man. Super excited to have you. Like I said, I loved reading, when you do get the chance, the small chance to talk FC Dallas. I think your takes are great, your content's great. So super excited to dive into this today. We've got lots to cover along some pretty, not like Emil Forsberg levels of additions, but pretty good additions.
God, here we go already.
You got some big losses in there too. We're going to look at some players who can break out, which is seemingly a yearly occurrence at the FC Dallas Talent Creation Factory. We're going to ask one big question, and we're going to talk about some predicted finishes. But before we do all of that, we got to talk about Scarf of the Week, our favorite segment here. Jose, what are you rocking today?
Oh, man, as on cue, right, with the FC Dallas fan in me and what we're talking about on today's episode, I have 2023 scarf. I usually get one, I don't say every season, probably every other season. I have my green screen behind me today, but usually you'd probably be able to see some of the scarves. This was an ode to Dallas Burn, right? So it's got obviously the FC Dallas logo on it, but it is the Burn Baby Burn scarf. So equally, it's also got the original OG Dallas Burn logo, man. And I've been watching games since '98 at the Cotton Bowl, watching Ariel Graziani and Jason Kreis and Oscar Pareja do their thing before we rebranded to FC Dallas in '03. So that one was special to me. I had to have it.
Nice. Love that. Graziani, what a name. We do MLS history here, and that name popped up. And we're like, who is this guy? And the more stories we read about, it's like this dude's in every one of them. Dude's a
the hair. I've seen that guy kick like boards off of the field, and just by missing opportunities. That guy was box office entertainment. I loved it.
Love it, man. Connor, what are you rocking?
We're talking FC Dallas. I'm bringing out my FC Dallas scarf.
Yes.
So we got Pride of Texas, and then Andrew's favorite thing with all his scarves, the meat in the middle crest.
The meat in the middle crest. I love it.
For whatever reason, my favorite part about scarves, like I just love when they meet in the middle. We just did like Montreal, which is this guy here for it. Over there somewhere, and it meets in the front on both sides, so super big, very cool. I actually have that same Dallas scarf. It's right here. I've also got a Dallas Burn scarf. It's right there.
Yes, I noticed that one when we first got on today.
Yep. But I figured, you know what, Connor was going to bring one. I figured you were going to bring one. I got to give some of my other scarves some love. I don't get to bring them out much when we're doing just MLS content. You guys went over to Portugal and decided to raid one of their teams. So
let's go, baby.
SL Benfica scarf in here. Got the logo on this side. Just different, right? Because Connor and I actually have the same FC Dallas scarf. The Dallas Burn, I had a feeling it was going to come as well. So we kind of hit all three boxes there: the big signing, the OG logo, and the new logo. So yeah. As much as we want to talk about scarves and scarf designs and things that I can talk about for hours, we really should talk about FC Dallas 2024. Nico Estevez in his third season in charge after an interesting path to the top of the coaching world through youth and assistant ranks before moving to the U.S., not just taking the player route into coaching, which I thought was super interesting. But last season, they got 8th in the West, 14th overall, 46 points, 11 wins, 10 losses, 13 draws. Lost to Seattle in the first round. So what are the vibes like in Dallas right now? You mentioned it earlier that you're feeling really excited. Anything else you want to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, look, first and foremost, I think last season, I'll preview kind of how I felt about 2023 coming into 2024. I think 7th place is pretty much all we could really ask for, considering a number of situations that impacted the team. Nothing crazy, but what I will say is that last year felt a little bit off, especially once we got to the midway point of the season moving forward. Whether it was injuries that we had to deal with, Ferreira taking off to the Gold Cup, him really being our only true offensive piece and weapon. I mean, a lethal one that we can rely upon week in and week out. And just inconsistency in certain positions and areas. I think we discovered ourselves a lot last season. And that it's interesting to say under Nico, right? Because he's still trying to nail down what the best version of this team looks like under him. And I think last season, we were just a very pragmatic team that had to deal with a number of situations that we handled pretty well, but were ultimately created a somewhat lackluster unit. So we finished, just above the wild card spot. When we bowed out to Seattle, I'll say this: it was one of the two series that went the full three, but it wasn't super exciting. It was two pragmatic teams who were good defensively that both equally struggled offensively. Our goal differential was +4, right? We were the second best team in the West, and it was +4, and that kind of tells the story. If Ferreira wasn't firing, or if he was injured, or whatever the case may be, we just didn't really have an offensive, power to lean on, and that speaks volumes of guys like Arriola, of guys like Velasco, who just also kind of had a down season, I guess you could say, by their standards. But with all of that said, there were questions heading into the offseason, right? What about Ferreira and his potentially, pending move to Europe, if that's ever going to happen? He's 22 years old now. Who takes over up top if that does happen? Are we going to make a big signing? Because there's all of these rumors rumbling in Dallas in the during this initial transfer window. And on top of all of that, you hear sanctions, MLS blocking a move, and we're going to keep Ferreira probably to open up the season at least. And so slowly and surely throughout the offseason, while I'm kind of just checking Big D Soccer every morning, checking other forums, trying to understand what's happening to our team and how we're going to shape up. I'm now starting to get to the point where we're excited, right? We've very recently announced the signing of Petar Musa. I can't give this man enough flowers. He hasn't kicked a ball for Dallas yet. I'll be watching him, hopefully against DC United next Saturday, for the last preseason game before the season opener, and hopefully get a chance to really watch him. But from what I've seen already, whether it's through the 6 caps he has for Croatia or for the 6 of 7 appearances he's had in Champions League with Benfica, a very versatile striker. A 25-year-old, someone who's in their prime, coming from a factory that produces talent in overseas in Europe, like Benfica. 6'3". I can't think of the last time we had a productive forward above 6 foot tall. We had Jesus Jimenez last season, but again, I said productive. And thankfully we've I should say, agreed to break the contract with him, and he's going to find his next home. But I feel like we have this piece that we just haven't had in a long time. And most importantly, which I think no fans are really talking about right now, is I believe we'll get a chance to see Ferreira in his natural position. I don't believe Ferreira is a striker, an out-and-out striker. I've said this for years. I've always felt that he's efficient enough there, and that's why he gets those opportunities, not just for FC Dallas, but the U.S. men's national team as well. But I really can't just help but feel excited. I always thought the signing of Musa, or a big player like Musa, was contingent upon the exit of Ferreira. And that wasn't the case. We not only did we keep Ferreira in this offseason, but we went out and signed Musa anyway. And didn't have to make this giant sale to do so. So we didn't lose any major pieces that are going to completely alter the shape of our team. We've added a little more depth, and we've made a major signing up front that should solve what I felt was a pretty big problem last season. So the vibes right now, I think, are as positive in Dallas as they've been in a long time.
You mentioned that nobody's talking about the Jesus Ferreira position, and I'll tell you, we're going to talk about it by the end of the episode, because it's part of a different segment. So, usually this is the point where we're like, oh, they brought in a ton of people. Who do we talk about as the best addition? But I don't know if there's anybody else who qualifies outside of Petar Musa. And you just hit a whole bunch of topics on him. Connor, do you want to add anything on him and that might not have been mentioned already?
I don't think there's too much to mention. I know with Benfica, he hasn't had like the consistent starting minutes, so it's going to be really interesting to see him finally get that with Dallas. But I mean, he's, even without the starting minutes, he's putting up starting level numbers. Like, I think he's got 1,200 minutes across the 2 seasons with Benfica, and in those 1,200 minutes, he's got 12 goals, 4 assists. It's insane. If he can do that across a full season, that's MVP worthy numbers. So exciting to see what he can bring to MLS.
Yep, and I'll just echo that. I actually, again, I think, Jose, I think you're reading off my notes here, because I have a team that's known for creating talent, goes and buys from a team that's known for creating talent, and not only do they buy, but they drop 12 bags on the guy. I mean, it is money that you've never seen this club spend. You've never seen many clubs spend realistically. I mean, if you look across the league, that money only comes out of the pockets of like Atlanta and LA,
Yeah.
right? So for and now you're looking at teams like Dallas and Chicago dropping this money. It's like, oh, now we're going to get a little exciting here. But absolutely love the addition. Think he's going to be really great fit. And again, I'm not gonna hint until we get to the end. I want to save it for the end. But I think he's going to combine really well with Jesus in a different position, with Paxton, with Areola, with all when Velasco gets back. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That being said, some people did have to leave. Who do you think is the biggest loss? Not a ton of them, but who do you think the biggest loss is?
Yeah, well, one more point before we go to the biggest
Sure,
loss.
sure, sure.
I think what I want to also point out too, and I've been trying to echo this sentiment on socials as much as I can, is that Qatar Musa, I think, is a signal of what MLS should be going after with signings in general, right? And just let's just put aside the fee for a second. I think the fact that this player is, was produced overseas, right? Or just, in a nation abroad that truly embraces the sport. He's a highly versatile striker in his prime, right? 25 years old, not 30, not 32, not 34, right? A 25-year-old who is going to elevate the profile of this league and is already doing that for the club that he signed for just a couple of weeks ago and has yet to actually kick a ball for the club professionally, technically, right? In a game that's worth something. So I feel like, you've seen the moves, even with Seattle, making the De La Vega signing, Atlanta making the Almada signing all those years ago. I've been very vocal about trying to get fans to understand that while what Inter Miami is doing is fantastic, right, for the branding of the league, I guess, bringing Messi and friends over from Europe and trying to form 2015 Barcelona, I think it's more impressive to find these hidden gems that no one's talking about that are actively contributing for powerhouse teams and clubs in Europe. And Benfica's a powerhouse, make no mistake about that. I think that this is what is truly going to elevate the profile of the league globally, right, and start having it viewed as a serious league. And that's something that I think that we're ready for in 2024. We're ready for MLS to be taken a little more seriously than it's been taken up to this point. And I'm not going to reel off the points with the retirement league, mantra that everyone's kind of echoed for a number of years. I think this move is a signal that we're going away from that. And I couldn't be more excited. I would love to see MLS continue to branch out into Eastern Europe, South America, wherever we can to really find some of these hidden talents. I think it's great for the league. Now, with that said, biggest loss for FC Dallas specifically heading in. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. We only really lost Obrian, Quignon, and Martinez. That's really like who we lost. This team is virtually unchanged. We've added more depth pieces and added a couple potentially starting pieces outside of Musa. I think the biggest loss from my perspective, and it's not going to be based on this person's ability because the ability is decent. But I'm going to lean on Martinez because of how shallow we are at the position. I think right now, if I were to put Dallas, if I were to rate them against all other teams in the Western Conference, I would say they're a very good team, but they're still missing key pieces. And I think we added Omar Gonzalez in the offseason. That's been great from a depth perspective, right? And also the story about him coming home to Dallas is where he grew up playing. That's all fantastic, but we're still starting with Tafari and Ibiaga. Ibiaga's only had a season or two in MLS, right? Most of his career is USL based. Tafari still 24, 25, I think. He's only had one.
Turning 27. I played against him.
Oh, sorry, he's 26, turning 27. Yeah. But he's only had one true year as a full out and out starter at that position. I would like to just see more depth added to the center back role, and because we suffered from an injury bug last season, right? We had Junca and Farfan rotating in and out, Tumasi coming in, Giovanni Jesus got injured. That entire back line outside of Tafari was like very makeshift from game to game, right? Like whatever Nico had at his disposal. So for me, and we're going to a 3-back system potentially. I'm not saying Martinez should have been kept. I just think we're gonna feel the need for a center back potentially by the summer window. That could be a thing. So I'm paying attention to that more than anything else. But from purely a playing perspective, Quignon had to be phased out so that Yaramendi and Pamakal could run the midfield, and it's unfortunate because Quignon, I thought, played pretty well in moments throughout the 2023 season. I thought we could have used him as a depth piece, but with Nolan Norris, with Frazier, with all these other players that we have in rotation, midfield is very, very deep for us this season. So I understand where we're going. The O'Brien loss is not that it's not big to me. It's bigger that he went to Austin than it is like if we lost a true attacking piece. I mean, he was a depth player. He's kind of always been that in Dallas. We'll miss him. But I'll be honest, I didn't take too kindly to say to hear him say that he was kind of excited to go to Austin, that when he got the call, he was ready to go. So, that's fine. It's great for the rivalry. I can't wait to play Austin. I think it's
Oh
going to
yeah.
be fantastic. So I think we're going to miss out on not having another depth center back like Martinez, but I'm hopeful that we can go out and get one.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. The depth is going to be your tough part, but I agree with. I don't think there's a ton of them that are like, oh my God, you didn't replace them. And I mean, outside of Jesus Jimenez, who I think is Dallas's Tom Barlow, it sounds like everybody's just happy he's out of the way, which probably a good guy, but didn't do the job. So
Yeah.
Connor, your biggest loss.
So my biggest loss was Martinez as well, and I think I think it was already covered by my notes, literally like word for word. So instead, I'm gonna go on a tangent about the first part that he was talking about right before the biggest loss. I was just kind of thinking about this. I feel like
Are we jumping? We're jumping all the way. Okay.
oh yeah. Because I think the league has been, I would say, across the summer transfer window and then this transfer window, those two windows combined have got to be like the best two windows this league has ever seen. Like they have made insane steps. Like obviously bringing in Messi was ridiculous. Like that dude could be 37. You bring him in because he's the GOAT and he's going to bring so many eyes with him. But the thing I love about this offseason is not only are we getting the Messi eyes over here, but we're bringing in talent now that's going to keep the eyes here. Like the Musa signings. Chicago just brought in Kuipers. I feel like Kuipers is right along the exact same lines. Like 20 goal scorer and a top team in Belgium. That's a great addition to add. And he's only like 27. So he's still got plenty of years left in his prime. De La Vega, like you were talking about, Peck for Galaxy. I know NYC were bringing in some young, exciting talent from South America. So it's like going and talking about all these different teams is kind of given this perspective. And it's like, man, they've been bringing in so much talent this window. And this isn't even supposed to be like the main window where a lot of teams across the world are doing a lot of their business. I mean, I know it's kind of MLS's main window because of when the league starts, but who knows? We could even see tons of more talent coming in the summer when teams are looking to offload from Europe.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to say, just to piggyback on that a little bit, Connor, I think equally we'll see some departures in the summer, right? That will also validate the quality of Major League Soccer. I think, if Ferreira were to move and leave FC Dallas, right? I don't get me wrong. From a competitive perspective, he makes this team better. He raises the level. So I would like to keep him from that perspective, but I also want to see that man succeed. And I think, his name's been kind of dragged to an extent. If you're a USMNT fan who watched him at the World Cup or watched him go full Pirates of the Caribbean in the Gold Cup, I mean, I think I'm ready for him to kind of make a move to Europe and sort of silence some of the haters that he has. But equally, if Almada makes his move, right, gets a 30 million move from Atlanta, that validates the league. All of these things, it's a constant cycle. Bringing the players in that we know raise the profile of the league, but equally having successful departures that shows that this league can be competitive and a player's not going to have a gap competitively in their career by deciding to going to MLS sooner than they anticipated, right? So I don't know. I agree with Connor wholeheartedly. Very, very exciting last couple windows.
We're gonna need to do a whole episode on this because I can go on to this for another couple of hours. But we're gonna try and keep our listeners not to drag through that yet. We'll do something later on. But yeah, I agree with you guys both. I think it's definitely a great sign. There's a lot of good movement going forward, and again, even when the Inter Miamis of the world, and I'm going to use the phrase take a step back by bringing in these 37, 38, 34, right? As a whole, that's not the model anymore. We know that, and all it takes is a couple of players out to show this is really what we're doing, right? One team doesn't set the trend. One team is the outlier, which wasn't the case 10 years ago. So, when we go to biggest losses, I put Quignon for, again, maybe just a little bit of depth. I think Fraser's been fine. Mende is going to be so good. I can't wait to watch him play a full season. Obrian had a lot of chances, but I don't think he really got a ton out of it. I think he, was kind of the Alex, again, using a Red Bull analogy, the Alex Mawil of Dallas, where he was just kind of all over the place. And when it came to the finishing product, it wasn't there. So I don't think you're going to feel a ton of these guys, especially with the moves that you've made. But with Dallas, you know that there's always going to be one player who just comes out of nowhere and starts having a really good season. Who do you think that guy's going to be?
Oh man, it's a great question because I think, like I said, some of the young guys are just coming off of a weird season in 2023. But one player who did not, and it has probably the craziest story in general, right? Bernie Kamungo. And if those who are not familiar have not watched the Taylor Twellman episode on his podcast where he kind of talks about his story in depth, I highly recommend that you do. Because I mean, the guy, without going into all of it, right? Just family's Tanzanian, refugee, getting his shot to play professionally through North Texas SC and MLS Next Pro, and then being one of the few youngsters that gets to make the jump to the first team. And with that opportunity, right, keep in mind, Ferreira going to the Gold Cup, some other injuries plaguing us up top, Ariola misfiring, Velasco kind of having to be leaned upon, but not doing too much with it. It almost created a perfect storm, right, for Bernie Kamungo to decide for himself, right, that he was going to come out and produce. And I think, if I haven't checked these numbers, these stats, but I'm willing to bet that based on efficiency, he's got to be up there with the number of minutes or matches that he's played and the output and production we've gotten out of him offensively, goal contributions, like per 90, he's got to be up there. But and now he's earning shots with the U23 national team. We're probably gonna see a point later on this season where he has to go to Paris and play in those those Olympic games. That's a great chance for him. He should definitely go. But I think he was already becoming the breakout story in 2023 because of what he was able to do with his shot. Now it's, can he truly have a full breakout season, right? Where his contributions, even if the minutes don't increase dramatically, because it is highly competitive. Keep in mind, we also brought back Dante Sealy, who's been looking good in preseason, signing Ines Sali, the Romanian wonder kid. I think that there's going to be heavy competition. Velasco will be back at some point, but I think Bernie's going to still be able to convert chances at a pretty highly efficient rate. And I think that he's going to, if he is able to just continue the story he started for himself in 2023, Dallas is going to have a breadth of options attacking wise to lean on. And the beauty of it is that Nico, instead of approaching it the way he approached it last season, where it was very predictable, pragmatic, we were almost relying upon the counter attack for chances. I think he's going to be able to have them free flow, the three up top, be able to rotate within each other, move around on the pitch, not stay static in that same position, and be versatile with the lineups, right? Move Velasco to the striker, move Ferreira out wide, move Kamungo out wide. All of these pieces, I think, can do what Nico Estevez is asking them to do. So I think Kamungo has to be the one that most fans are probably excited about, outside of the notable additions that we've already spoken about.
I'll tell you, Kamungo is the fourth highest on goals per 90. Behind Brandon Cambridge, who scored a brace in like one game, Paul Rothrock for Seattle, and Nick Firmino, who is averaging 22.5 goals per 90 because he played 2 minutes and scored 1 goal. So
that's why he's my breakout player.
I'm gonna build off of your mentions there, because you mentioned Dante Sealy, who is my breakout player. Yeah. I've read about him as being a guy with all the talent and very little commitment. But with Velasco out, I see that spot up for grabs, at least for the short term. And if he can switch on and really focus for just a couple more weeks, maybe months, he can earn a starting spot and make a name for himself to make the move. Whether he's here because he thought, oh, I was at PSV and now I'm coming back and I'm better than this, or whatever the mindset is, which, I don't know because I don't know the guy. He's got an opportunity now to switch on, earn a spot, and then earn his place wherever he wants to go. So that's the guy I'm watching to see. Maybe he can, because you're right. He's super talented. I watched a little bit of him in preseason. He looks great, but he's got to have that commitment and the focus to get there. So that'll be a storyline I'm watching.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sealy is just kind of put a bow on that point. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I don't know what it was in 2023, but when he got back, we brought him back in, it felt very lukewarm. Like he was just, I don't want to make it sound like he was just coming on for training, right? But it did sort of feel like that. We would put him in and there'd be bursts of energy, but you wouldn't see any major impact on the game by bringing him in. I would say 2023, his impact was more of raising the floor as opposed to raising the ceiling of the team. And now I believe with this brand new formation, we're going to be able to run. Hopefully, it's been confusing for a lot of people because of how it's played, but depending on how you look at it, either a 3-4-3 or a 5-2-2-1. But I think that releasing him from the pressure of being involved in the offense to a point where he's scoring goals or assisting goals, and just having him be a piece that just actively contributes either with his runs or with his crosses or just his pace. I mean, I think that's the situation that works perfect for Sealy. And with him being more of a wing back and winger now in this new formation, maybe this is what he needs right now. Maybe this is going to allow Sealy to really shine like he has been in preseason. I don't really know, but I agree with you, Andrew. I think it's something that fans will be watching out for sure.
Yeah. Connor, your player.
I'm taking us back to Kamungo because he's my breakout player as well.
My bad.
Exactly as we were talking. I mean, out of anybody that's played 500 minutes or more, so we take out the guys that, just had one good game and then just didn't really play much. He was clear, like far and away the best per 90 goal scorer. The only ones close to him were Pukki Yakumakis and Duncan McGuire, which is amazing company to be in.
Insane company to be in.
Yeah. So, I like his chances to get minutes this season, considering, he can play on the wing. He could play up top. I know he's probably not that. If everybody's healthy and everybody's playing well, he's probably not the starting option in that regard. I think Ariola, Velasco, Musa, Ferreira, it'd be hard to kind of get in front of those guys. But, it's very difficult to stay healthy the entire season. And Velasco's already out with an injury. So, I could see Kamungo definitely getting many more minutes than what he got last season. And if he even remotely brings that level of productivity that he brought last season, I think he's in for a definitely a breakout year this year.
Agreed. One point about Kamungo too, for those who haven't watched in preseason or pay attention to what Dallas is doing in this new formation, it's really kind of been between Kamungo and Sealy to an extent on those wing backs, right? I think we're probably going to end up seeing either Endely, maybe even Giovanni Jesus when he's back from injury on the right wing back. But I think the goal is to make that left wing back a little more inverted and a little more involved in the attack. And I've been seeing kind of back and forth between Sealy and Kamungo. So I think that could be the storyline is, which one of them will be able to nail down that position. And I could really see us, if we were to make a comparison to, a style of play in Europe that someone can go watch and say, what is FC Dallas shooting for? I think and this is not, a comparison to the record or what they've built up to this point, because it's insane, but what Xabi Alonso has Leverkusen doing right now, through the wing back play is, I think, what Estevez is shooting for, is to be so unpredictable, and also just allow Pamecol and Yadamendi to solely focus on distribution. I think the wing backs are going to be extremely crucial to Dallas' success, provided that we get to where I think we can go in 2024.
Really good points, and big fan of Kamungo on this pod. We've given him lots of praise, so it'll be really interesting to see if he can make that next step. But I do want to ask you, what's your one question for the team as the season goes on and as we see things develop? What are you going to be constantly looking for or questioning about the side?
Oh man, I think it hasn't reared its ugly head just yet, but I really think at some point there will be questions asked about this back line. I think the 3-back system, and where Marco Farfan fits into that back line is going to be very, very important. I think right now on day one, if we're deciding who starts back there tomorrow, it has to be Ibeaga, Tafari, Junka. I think that's probably our back three, not just for the fact that they're our best individual defenders, but they're also our most athletic. I believe their ability to recover on runs quickly is a big piece of it all. And I feel like teams will figure out a way before the end of the season to attack that. And, any team who runs a 3-back system, whether it's domestically or abroad, understands that that's the risk, right? look to dominate possession as much as possible with the understanding that you could get caught out. And that's why I also feel that Omar Gonzalez alone as the one true depth piece on the bench may not be enough, right? To sign maybe another athletic center back who raises the floor of what we can do in the back line, as I think would just be a smart signing to make. I don't expect Dallas to be, for these reasons, I don't expect Dallas to hold the same defensive record that we held last season. I do think we'll get scored on a little bit more. But if you asked me or any Dallas fan prior to the 2024 season, would we be okay with leaking a few more goals to potentially score significantly more? Yeah, I think so. I think that that's going to be a trade that we're willing to make, and I'm willing to bet that we'll see it. So the back line, it's not that it's questionable. It's that if you really have to pick a weakness out in this team, whether it's because of the formation or because of the defenders that we have back there and how experienced they may or may not be, that has to be the biggest question mark.
Yeah, and that's something that we were talking about kind of offline when we were doing our graded transfer moves. You know, we put out our posts and things like that. And Omar Gonzalez came in at the time to be CB3, and we're like, uh-oh, that's not good. So they started working on it and getting a little bit better. But yeah, even as your rotation piece, right? It's you can't expect Omar Gonzalez to go 1,500 minutes a year. You just can't. Like, it's just not going to work. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Connor, your question.
I have a feeling I'm gonna have a very similar question to you. So you can hit me with your world famous line of, "Oh, you stole my notes."
And you know I will.
With Musa coming in, what role does Jesus Ferreira play this season? Are we gonna see him take that more of that role where he played when Pepe was here, where he was kind of like a second striker, more creative? Which I think you were kind of hinting at this before. I agree. I think he is more suited for that role. I think he's capable as a lone striker, but I think he's even better when he's paired with somebody else and he can be a bit more creative, because I think he's a really like good creative player. So I would like to see him take that role with Musa this year, but my question is just going to be exactly how they play him. Maybe they even play him deeper than that. I don't know, but that's what I'll be keeping an eye on.
Hey Connor.
Yeah.
Connor, why are you stealing my notes, buddy?
Yeah, there we go. There it is.
Because that's exactly what I had to. Last season, lots of one striker formations. Musa comes in, and you have to expect that your $12 million guy is going to start at the 9. What does that mean for Jesus? And personally, I'd love to see him drop into that false 9 or even as a number 10. I think he excels there. I really liked it when he came off of the line, and even when he was playing as the 9 in Dallas, he would come off the line, he'd receive it in the half space, he'd turn, and then he gets the others involved. And now it's like, okay, now we're cooking. But when you asked him to be the guy who ran in behind or held up the ball, I don't think he was as strong as he could have been. So now what does that mean? I think if you can either play him as a 2 and encourage him to drop off every single time, or you can play him in that number 10 role and let him just experiment and figure things out. And that's where I think he'll excel. That also allows Paxton Pomykal to kind of float around, whether it be wide or deeper. It gives you a lot more options now that you're not stuck leaving a very creative player at the 9. So tons of options. I'd love to see Jesus at the 10. Connor, I'd love to see you stop stealing my notes, but whatever.
I will say this about Ferreira. I think if we had to kind of predict what his production could look like in this new role for him, I think the last couple seasons for Ferreira have been very telling of what we could probably expect. I think in 2022, he's coming off of 23, 24 goal contributions. Very, very productive season for a forward in MLS. And I think that's why the whole world thought that this is just what this man does. He scores goals. I've always seen him kind of as, like we've always talked about, the second forward, the center forward that sits behind the striker. But I actually think he's versatile enough to also in a 4-3-3 or in a 3-4-3 be one of the 3 forwards out wide, right? To be on the left or on the right if needed. And not necessarily be a true winger, but find a way to, once we get the ball, tuck in, have runners, kind of peel off of him. He has 2 strike options in front of him to distribute the ball to. He can be the player who makes the trailing runs into the box as opposed to the primary runs. If you go watch any of the goals that we scored in 2023, there really weren't many of those opportunities where we were finding those low-driven balls from the wide areas into numerous options in the box. It was always only Ferreira or only Velasco or, insert player here. But I think that type of drop-off where we see 24 goal contributions in 2022 to 18 in 2023. But he gets more assists, but he's more actively involved in the attack, but he's scoring from positions he's never really scored from before. I think that's probably what we'll see, right, from Ferreira is whether he's doing it from the wide right, the wide left, or just sitting tucked in a little bit deeper behind that striker, behind Musa, or just flat out being the striker because we need to rotate and Musa maybe needs an opportunity to rest. I think the versatility of this offense is going to be on full display in 2024.
Oh, man, you mentioned the winger, and now my coach brain is starting to think, oh, how do we use this guy as a winger? And just thinking about it, right? You just mentioned, right? You get your overlapping wingback, especially if you're playing in a 3. You get those guys high, you pinch those wingers inside. Now he's like an offset 9-10 anyway. But you can include other players in the midfield. Now you're not limited to taking one guy out, put one guy in, right? Exactly. And it's all about the role and responsibility. And I think he'll be really excited. But you were predicting where he might be, but now I got to ask you, where are you predicting Dallas to finish at the end of this year? Look at that trade.
Damn. Yeah, I think look, I'll be a little bullish here. I think Dallas from a 2023 perspective, our biggest holes were offensively. The consistency just wasn't there. The over-reliance on one player was massive. And to release Ferreira of that pressure, to release the offense of that pressure, and signing someone who will create what we all believe he'll create in terms of impact. I think Dallas vaults themselves from a round 1 playoff team to potentially a Western Conference final contender. I think that's how big Musa will be for Dallas, and not just for the goals, but for what he will allow other players to become in this new offense that we're looking to produce. So I see them as a minimum top 4 team in the West, and I can see them making to the Western Conference final. Past that, I think it's really just going to depend on how experienced some of these players can be, their clutch factor in a game's this big. If we get that far, Dallas hasn't been that far in quite some time, right? The last MLS Cup final, the only one we ever went to is in 2010. And that was, Ferreira V1. That was David Ferreira, his dad. And I think, that's honestly the version of Jesus Ferreira we might see, right? More of a playmaker as opposed to a second striker. And I think that's a realistic prediction for where this team, who's very, very lethal now, can potentially end up.
I like it. I like the positivity. Connor, do you agree?
I do. Yeah. Ooh. So I've got them 2-4. I think really the only thing keeping me from thinking they can hit the top of the West is just that center back situation. But what I will say on that is the roster build reminds me a lot of another team that did very well, and that would be the 2023 Columbus Crew. That's a team where I look at and I see really like one center back on the team. I know they had more, but really one true center back was all they had in that team. And they made it work. I don't think the one center back system is something that can win the supporter shield. I think it's kind of a somewhat hit or miss thing. I think overall it could definitely work, but I think, obviously you're going to have your off days. So I think it's a system where you'll see a lot of similarities to how Columbus did last year, where they finished 3rd, still very successful regular season. But then once it comes to MLS Cup and the tournament knockout style, where it's more one-off games, I think that's where the formation will thrive. So with that being said, I think I kind of envision something similar for them this season. I look at the center back department. I don't see too much there. So I think that kind of forces the hand of if they're going to go with 3 in the back, maybe we see some guys that were a little bit more out of position, like Junqua, for example. So I see a good finish in the West, and then I see a really strong team. Assuming everybody's healthy and they keep everybody, I see a really strong team in MLS Cup.
Love that. I will say this too, Connor. It's funny you mentioned Columbus Crew. I think, a similar situation they went through in 2023 where they lost Zella Ryan. I think Dallas could be faced with the same level of adversity this coming season. I really do believe that the question of whether or not Jesus Ferreira leaves in summer, that door will not close until the window is closed. I think that there's going to be that opportunity, especially if he comes out showing a version of his game that, because of his positioning, we just haven't seen before. And maybe he opens up some more doors for himself in terms of just transfer opportunities. I think people were asking a lot of questions of the Crew when they let go of Zella Ryan. They quickly answered those by signing Rossi, what was it, 2 or 3 days later. but I still believe that it was a move that questioned the validity of that team, and they were able to kind of overcome that adversity anyway. I'm not saying outright that, Zella Ryan and Ferreira are the same player, or that, Crew and Dallas are the same team and have the same path. But I think you can draw certain similarities there, which should bode well for Dallas and, our fan base heading into this new season.
I'm still high on them, but not that high. I think there are some other teams in the West that are strong that I would consider definitely, in the top 4 conversation. I see Dallas in the tier just below that. So I think a home playoff game is not out of the question. But I 100% it's a playoff side. Like we'll put that into writing. But I've got them between 3 and 6, like the low end of the home playoff games or the high end of the non-home playoff games, even though you're going to get one anyway in the first round. That's kind of, I see them right in that, rounding out the middle group. But I will say, and I mentioned this with LAFC last night, the West is one of those conferences where it's not like super strong top to bottom. Like the East has probably 7 teams that can finish in the top 4, maybe 8. Though I don't think the West is built like that, but it is something where it's still close. Like it's very competitive in that 1 or 2 off games or 1 or 2 bad decisions can determine whether you're in the home playoff games or the non-home playoff games. And that's kind of where I see them as, if everything clicks, I can see them getting, a top 4, inside the top 4, 3 or 4. But if they do slip up in the run in and, they drop a game here or there because of injuries or because of international call-ups or whatever it may be, they could slip into the 5 or 6 range. But that's kind of where I've got.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the whole East versus West conversation is really interesting, and we could probably do a whole conversation and video about that just by itself. But I always find the East is so dominant over the West shouts interesting, because I think when you go look at the statistics, for example, I think 2 of the 3 best defensive teams in all of Major League Soccer are in the West. The number 1 goal scorer in MLS is in the West. I think that the West is very top heavy. From there's a massive drop. Whereas you just see more consistency across the board in the East. The quality of individual players, I think, also is spiked on the eastern side, of course, by Inter Miami and even the Columbus Crew. You just don't see that many, I guess, outside of Bawanga, you don't see many game-changing DPs on the West as you do in the East. But I think, there may be a shift in the tide. I think, what St. Louis was able to do, leveling up their weaknesses in the offseason, Galaxy getting a little bit better, Rapids making moves that I haven't seen since Nottingham Forest in 2021 and 22. I think, that the combination of all these things, I don't know, we may be, kind of set for a leveling off. Who knows, right? But I think any fan who supports a team in the Western Conference should be kind of excited, because there was a lot of movement in this offseason.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think just 5 years ago, the Western Conference was the one you're like, oh, look out for them. So I think it's always ebbing and flowing. So I definitely expect the West to come back and be and regain that. But again, that's also what makes the league good, exciting, and it makes it grow, right? Because if and this will take us to a whole different conversation, but if you know that FC Cincinnati is going to win the East every year and then they're going to blow out every team in the West, it's not as fun. If you see every 5 years, oh man, St. Louis just came in and now they're running things. Houston was bottom for 3 years and now they just won the US Open Cup and are 4th in the, that ability to constantly keep things engaged and changing allows growth. So before we dive down that rabbit hole, let's just pump the brakes and call it there. Jose, thanks so much for coming on to talk FC Dallas with us. Really, really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, man. No, seriously. Thank you guys so much for having me. Like I said, I don't get a chance to talk FC Dallas very often, so I'm kind of letting everybody know. I mean, as the season goes on, 2024, if anyone wants to come at me, please do. I got a feeling I'm going to be very loud on social media with the Musa goals that are incoming. But at the same time, I feel like Dallas needs a little more love, right? Everybody's, talking about Austin FC. Everyone knows the championship caliber of, Dynamo and Houston collectively across their organization. I'm excited to now feel like there's maybe a shifting of the tide, at least here in Texas, and hopefully that ripples throughout the Western Conference. So season can't kick off soon enough. Gentlemen, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks so much for being here. We want to give you a little bit of time to tell our listeners where to find you. So plug some links.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I mean, more than anything else, if you want to know anything about me, my baby, my everything is Golz TV. So if you want to go check it out, it's golz.tv is the domain. You can find us on socials on just about any platform, GOLZ TV. Again, this is spelling. Go check us out. We're trying to put as many soccer-specific creators on blast here in North America. I think we're part of this massive wave that needs a lot more love than it currently gets. I got a feeling we're going to be there in no time. But you can find a ton of awesome content on that platform and a lot more unique features that are built solely for North American soccer fans coming to that platform very soon. So outside of that, my personal handle, it's Bromigo on everything. It's an old gamer handle, so don't question me about it. And yeah, man, again, I can't thank the Andrew and Connor enough for having me on the show today, man. Seriously, this talk was awesome.
Yeah, we really appreciate you being here, guys. If you're listening, go over to Golz TV, go give them some love and go check it out. It's a great platform. Also, if you guys are new here on our end and this is your first time hearing us, make sure you subscribe and follow us. We do 29 of these team interviews. So I think we got about 7 more after Dallas that'll be coming up, but there are also 22 more beforehand. So go check those out and give the other creators we worked with some love as well. And then stick around for the regular season. We do our MLS takes on whatever news is happening that week. We do our MLS history series where Dallas has been featured significantly over the past couple of episodes. We talk about them all the time. And then also just some games and some trivia challenges and things just to keep things light and test your ball knowledge. So if you enjoy any of that stuff, come hang out with us as well. Jose, again, thanks so much for being here. We really enjoyed it. We hope everybody enjoyed listening to it. And we will see you all next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.